Thanks everybody for being here for Mass today. Thanks to our parents for bringing your kids to Mass, grandparents who bring your grandkids to Mass. And big thanks as always to our amazing choir and amazing choir director, Harriet, for beautiful music at the 10:30 Mass. We all are so edified by it and so grateful. It lifts our minds and hearts to the lofty places we really want to be. So thank you. And today, speaking of the lofty places we want to be, the Lord presents to us really through the prophet Isaiah. The church really presents to us through the prophet Isaiah, through St. Paul and St. Peter, just the fact that we have a mission, that the Lord calls his disciples, as he said to Peter, to put out into the deep water and lower our nets for a catch. Those words apply not only to Peter, but they apply to every disciple. Very cool, these readings. In the first reading, the prophet Isaiah was reluctant because of his own weakness. He said, I have, I think he says, my lips are, impure. I have unclean lips, that's what he says. And I'm not good enough to be your servant. And the Lord touches his lips and heals him. And then the Lord said, who will I send? Who will go for us? And these familiar words, Isaiah says, here I am, send me. And St. Paul in the second reading talks about how he was sent despite the fact that he was, prior to his conversion, a great persecutor of the church. At one point, it says in the Acts of the Apostles, that he was breathing murderous threats against the church. This guy was a seriously dangerous man. He sat in judgment over the death and martyrdom of the first martyr, St. Stephen. And yet the Lord called St. Paul, though unworthy, and made him the apostle to the Gentiles. Unbelievable. And then, of course, the calling of St. Peter, this beautiful Luke chapter 5, verse 1 through 11, the beautiful calling of St. Peter to follow him. And how it happens that Jesus was preaching to a large crowd there at the Sea of Galilee, sometimes called the Sea of Tiberias or the Lake of Gennesaret. It's all the same place. This lake, this sea, which St. Peter knew inside and out, he'd been fishing on it his whole life. Jesus is preaching there, and the crowds are too big, about to crush him, so he hops into Peter's boat, not invited, just gets into his boat and says, hey, put out a little ways. And from the boat, he preaches to the people on the hillside. And then after he's done preaching, it's probably about 11 or 12 in the daytime, 11 a.m., 12 noon, and Jesus turns to Peter and says, put out into the deep waters and lower your nets for a catch. Of course, anybody who knows anything about fishing knows that at 11 o'clock or noon, you're not very likely to drop a line in the water and catch a fish. And Peter has even more reason. He says, Lord, we've been out all night. We've been out all night, and we haven't caught anything. But at your command, I'll put out to the deep waters and lower my nets. And he does, and of course, they're astonished at the amount of fish that they caught. And but there's hesitancy here, right? There's hesitancy with Isaiah, with Paul and Peter, and for good reason. And there might be hesitancy for us. In number one, just feeling worthy to belong to the Lord. And then number two, in having the confidence or whatever it might be that we need to put out into the deep waters and lower our nets for a catch. And everybody's called to put out into the deep. St. John Paul II beat that like a drum during the final years that he was alive. The phrase in Latin, duc in altum, put out into the deep. In one way, it means to live the deeper life. In another way, it means to go out on your mission in life, to not get stuck inside. The church is always outward bound, and we want to be outward bound. So the Lord says, put out into the deep. One priest in those years back around the turn of the millennium, I heard a priest say beautifully, if you're up to your ankles in the water, it's time to get into your knees. If you're up to your knees, it's time to get into your hips. If you're up into your hips, it's time to get up to your chest. If you're up to your chest, it's time to get up to your neck. If you're up to your neck, it's time to put out into the deep. In fact, hey, everybody, let's just all put out into the deep after all, right? What does it mean to put out into the deep? What does it mean to lower our nets for a catch? Well, I think it means to go out and really try to bring people to Christ, to be fishers of men, which is the call for St. Peter, but it's the call of every disciple. Every man and woman, child, it doesn't matter what age we are, how old or young, we all have the capacity and ability to go out, to put out into the deep, and to lower our nets for a catch. Now, it's natural for us, in one hand, maybe to feel kind of unworthy of the Lord's calling. And so, like, I know in the seminary, just about every guy, I can't imagine any guy, every seminarian at one point comes to the point where he says to his superior or spiritual director or formation director, look, I feel called to this, but honestly, I'm not worthy of this. And that's a good thing for him to feel. Like, if he didn't feel that way, we wouldn't want him to be a priest. It's natural that we would feel unworthy to do these things. And I know that's true for the priesthood. I think sometimes we might feel that way in our own personal life. Even me, sometimes I feel like, I know myself, Lord. And sometimes we just might not feel worthy. And maybe more commonly, though, we might not have the confidence. Like, we might doubt or have hesitancy, like St. Peter. Lord, we were out all night. I know this body of water better than anybody. You're a preacher, I'm a fisherman. But if you say so, we'll do it. We'll go out to the deep waters and lower our nets for a catch. He's like, I know this isn't going to work. Do you ever feel that way? I know this isn't going to work. This isn't working. I'm troubled. Honestly, I felt that way a little bit yesterday. I was driving to a funeral in West Seneca. It was actually a funeral for the mother of a seminarian who used to serve here, John Stanton. Some of you might remember John. Spent a summer here, great guy. And his mom passed away. John was a model son, took care of his mother manfully, incredibly. And sacrificed a lot to help his mom in the last decade. And so I was driving to her funeral, and while I was driving there in the morning, it was pretty early, and I was just saying to the Lord, like, Lord, I don't know what to do. Like, I've been pretty worried about, like, rebuilding the church in some ways, the future, because it's hard, like, I'm going to put out some financial data within about a month at most, and it's going to be pretty eye-opening for everybody. Each parish has its own challenges. All of us have, like, a great shortfall, which should be in our permanent maintenance funds for our cemeteries, combined for one Catholic to the tune of about $5 to $6 million shortfall for what should be there. And like some of our parishes have spent through like their savings. It's hard, there's that side of it that worries me. And we know that like less people are going to Mass, there's less resources available. And things only cost more. Like 10 years ago, our collections across these parishes was like a third higher than it is now. And yet, costs of everything have gone up. So it's tough. It's like I feel handcuffed sometimes, And more importantly than even those things, of course, is just sacramentally, like the number of weddings, the number of baptisms, the number of First Communions. And I'm so desirous to like flip that script. Like for baptisms, for example, well, we started to flip it. We actually have 11 babies or kids under the age of 6 in the queue to be baptized for all of one Catholic right now. But I want to note that 8 of those 11 have Hispanic, or they're Hispanic, which is telling for our family of parishes. Beautiful, but it's telling. And so all those things, they weigh on me, and I was just saying to the Lord, like, Lord, I don't know. All the things we've tried don't seem to work. I was saying to the Lord, like, everything I can't rely on the old stuff anymore, Lord. I need new ideas, and I need them from you. And maybe from, I don't care how you get them to me, but I need to think new. How can we lower our nets? Like, what is the way to do it? And I don't want to sugarcoat the situation we're in. And that's the way I felt. So I was just saying that to the Lord. And I could say, like, I mean, there's a lot of things for me when I think about lowering the nets, that me, Mark Noonan, as the pastor of these parishes, like, I want to tell you, there's a lot of things I'd like to do that I can't do. Like, for example, I'd like the 5:30 Mass here on Saturdays to be at 4 p.m. But I can't do it. Like, I don't have another priest that I could slot and have 4 p.m. Masses. I just don't have a guy who can be in 2 places at once. If I could, I would. And even like, I think every town feels like, well, we used to have a priest who was here all the time. And, Father Mark, Father Paul, and Father Jan, they're just like, pinballs, And I don't want it to be that way. We don't want it to be that way. And especially me, like, if I had my way, I'd be like, yeah, every priest, like, is in his own town. Like he used to be. Because you're supposed to belong to that place. And I do belong to this place. But sometimes it can feel like, yeah, but also there and there and there. Yeah, for me, it's all one. But I think for some people, it can feel like, our priests are so divided. I just want you to know, we don't want to be divided. We are all in, totally. Even though sometimes in all these places, all the towns, it might not quite feel that way. And I think, a lot of Catholics too, there's one sort of thing in recent years that we Catholics, like, we've gotten sort of, we've misunderstood. It's more Americans than Catholics. We think of like the church or the parish or going to church or living the Christian life like we think of the supermarket, like grocery store. Like, where do you shop? Do you shop at Tops? Do you shop at Save-A-Lot? Do you shop at Aldi's? Do you shop at Wegmans? Where do you go? And why do you go there? Well, you go to the one that you go to because you like it. It meets your needs. It's the one that makes you happiest, whatever. Why do you watch a TV show? Because I like it, whatever. And we live in a consumerist, materialist culture where we choose what we want for ourselves. But Christianity is different than that. It is in part like, yeah, I want to go to church and I want my spiritual life to be elevated by that. But the Catholic faith is about a relationship with God and relationships with others. It's about more than just making me feel good or meeting my personal needs. If I only go to church because it helps me or I like it, that's tenuous, because it's easy, you could hear it. You could talk to people who stopped going to Mass and then say things like, well, I don't like it anymore, so we don't go. Or I don't like the priest, so we don't go. Or I don't like the songs, so we don't go. Or I don't like the new carpets, so we don't go. Or I don't like those Eucharistic ministers, so we don't go. Or I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I don't like this, or it's too this. Or the priest 20 years ago, he said this to me, I get it. Those things happen. We're sorry. We're like the Buffalo Bills. We'll always give you something to be disappointed about, probably, right? Love the Bills. But it's about more than that. It's like being in a family. I'm in my family, not just because I like it and it suits me, but because they're my family. And even though it's not perfect, I'm in all in. That's the way we want to be in our family. That's the way we got to be about our faith too. So, so me, I'm thinking a lot about Noonan, Mark Noonan, that's me. How are you going to lower your nets for a catch now? You got suggestions? I'm all ears. But here's some suggestions for all of us as disciples, that how we can lower our nets, because it's time. I think actually the Lord is really saying to the church in this part of the world, in this diocese, in this community, in Albion, put out in the deep water and lower your nets. So what are some practical things we could do to do that? Number one, I would say, and this is obvious, everyone knows what I'm going to say. It's obvious, but it is actually truly the most important, is we have to pray. And let me add something to prayer. Like, not just pray, but pray intentionally, like for specific people, and specific things. People often ask me to pray for them. They'll be like, Father Mark, would you pray for me? I got surgery this week. Or Father Mark, would you pray for my daughter? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll pray. After about 10 years as a priest, I realized that I would sort of loosely include those things when I generally prayed, but not intentionally. So now when someone asks me to pray and I say, yeah, I'll pray for you, right away I start in my brain, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed. At least I've said devotedly one Hail Mary. For that person, I told them I would pray for. And it's for them. And then I add them to like all the, sort of general prayers that I say. But I want to be intentional about it. To really pray, to get on our knees and beg the Lord. Lord, help us to grow. Bring more of our brothers and sisters in my family and in our community back to the body of Christ. And not only to pray, but I'm going to say to fast as well. Prayer and fasting go together. And fasting is super powerful. In the economy of grace, the sacrifice of fasting bears huge fruit for whoever or whatever it is offered for. So okay, these things like, I'm not going to eat today until dinner. I'm going to fast until dinner. I'm not going to eat desserts this week. After dinner, I'm not going to have that extra glass of wine. We're not watching TV in the house this week. I'm not hitting the snooze button for a month. Any kind of sacrifice or fast. And then give it to the Lord for something specific. Lord, for the conversion of everybody in our town and village. Lord, for the conversion of my sister. Lord, for the conversion of my nephew. Actually, I'm going to ask everybody in One Catholic this Lent that all of us, all the fasting we do, we make it for the conversion of everybody in our communities, around our parishes, and for all of our family members. That all of us, all of our fasting is food here, Lord, for this. Prayer and fasting. Second thing is to be bold. Like, we could use a little more boldness in living the faith and communicating about the faith. And that boldness doesn't have to be in any way, hard charging. It can be genuine and simple. But it's bold. So ask questions and listen. Maybe it's a friend, a sibling, a nephew, a niece, somebody you know, somebody who used to go to church, somebody who's never been to church. But most people in this country are unsatisfied with their life. Or they're uncertain. Everybody's looking for happiness and love that lasts forever. And we're not finding it in the things that are around us. Because you can't find it there. So there's a longing that's not being met. And we can speak to that. If you were to sit down with a friend or a family member or somebody you know and just ask them a question, here's 4 questions. What do you think happens when we die? What are you ultimately looking for in your life? What do you think lasts forever? What do you want to have forever? Or some question along those lines. You ask somebody a question like that, you're going to be opening a door. You're going to have the answer to give them. We can listen to them, hear what they have to say. Maybe also share our own impressions about such questions. But really to listen. But just opening that door. Especially to grandparents, I want to say. Grandparents, you have a long leash. Grandma and Grandpa can get away with a lot. And my grandma, a couple times she sat me down in my life. One time she sat me down, she goes, Mark, you're worrying too much. You got to cut it out. And I was like a 27-year-old man. And I loved it that my grandma said that to me. It woke me up. I'm like, you're right, Grandma. How do you even notice that, Grandma? She's Grandma. Sometimes Grandma can put the steel-toe boots on and, give us a little kick. And we need our grandmas to do that. Sometimes we need our grandpas to give us a little, come on, buddy, let's go. I always want to encourage grandparents to not be afraid to do that. But all of us too, to not be afraid to open the door. And in response, maybe there's a response that we give verbally, to people in such conversations. But part of the response should also be that I give the witness of a joyful disciple in my life. That I want to convey to people my love for God and the joy that it gives me. So I've been really trying to be super intentional about this over the last year, because I read about a priest who really inspired a lot of young men to the priesthood just by telling people how much he loved being a priest. So I've been more vocal about that, and it's growing for me. Like I started to tell people, like, I love being a priest. Absolutely love it. Is it hard? Yeah, tremendously hard. Is it amazing? It's incredibly amazing. But I love it. I love it. In fact, lately I've been telling people that I feel totally spoiled by the Catholic Church. And most people have never heard anybody say that. But I do feel that way. I feel spoiled by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church gave me everything I've got. My mom and dad met through a Catholic organization. My parents had 8 kids because the Catholic Church teaches certain things. My brother, I have all my brothers and sisters because of the Catholic faith. I was educated by the Catholic Church in so many beautiful ways, and I was called through the sacramental life to the priesthood, and I got the chance to study and serve all over the world. I got blessed by the church, taught me to speak 2 languages. Well, I guess my parents taught me to speak English, but the church taught me another language. And I get to serve like all these amazing people with my life. And I get time to pray. Every year I get to make like a beautiful retreat. Like the church has just totally spoiled me. I love being a priest. And I love being a workhorse. Because I'll tell you something about me. At this point in my life, God bless me with good health, and I'm an absolute workhorse, and I love it. Like, I love being a workhorse for God and for the people in these communities, this community, and all the ones that we serve. I love it. I'm so happy to be able to do it. And I tell people that, and they're like, wow. It's effective. It affects people. But I think we all got to find the words to do that, because you know what? People are quick to be like, yeah, they changed the carpets. Did you hear? Or yeah, they did this. Yeah, the songs are really loud now. I just don't like it anymore. The Eucharistic ministers aren't walking in the same direction anymore. I don't like it anymore. I'm not going to go to church for a while. Because people think it's negative, you know? Instead of putting out into the deep, we'll fuss around in the shallows. But we don't want to fuss around in the shallows. We got to put out into the deep. And so we want to give others a joyful witness. What could you say to your grandkids? You know, put up a little sign in your kitchen that says, I love being a Catholic. You know? Tell your friends and family, like, you know what? Being a Catholic is like super sweet. It's so awesome. Sacraments, come on. So beautiful. There's so many things that we could say. But we kind of want to advertise the joyful witness. That's the point. And lastly, we can extend personal invitations. Really, I mean, so many people have fallen away from the practice of the Mass. And there's a lot of reasons and a lot of things. Some of it's something that happened to them, you know, where that maybe somebody upset them at some point. Some of it's very serious stuff. Some of it's just they got out of the habit. Some of it's pandemic related. But we can go to them and say, hey, come on, let's get back to Mass. To reach out and invite them back. To write a note to family members and tell them the story of the faith and the history of your family and why it's important for them to realize that and say, hey, to take to heart the practice of going to Mass every Sunday. Even people in this community who grew up in this parish, who used to come to church, to remind them, hey, we received this beautiful thing for free from all the generations that went before us. And if we don't step up now, it's not going to be here in 10 or 15 years. We have to do it. You're a part of it. Let's go, bro. Let's go. Let's put out into the deep. Let's lower our nets. It's not us who can bring the fish in. The Lord's got to do it. But it can only happen if, despite doubts and uncertainties, we, like St. Peter, say, Master, we've tried everything we can, but at your command, we will put out into the deep, and we will once again lower our nets.